First Horizon Home Loan Corporation. Good afternoon, Mark.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Before we get started, I don't know too much about you. You came highly recommended from some of your other buddies at First Horizon. I do know you did about $60 million in '99. But before we get started, I wondered, everybody likes to know what people's background is and where they came from, and so I thought we'd start there.
Well, basically I have about 14 years in the mortgage industry, right out of college, basically.
Where'd you go to college?
University of Houston.
Mm-hmm.
And had the opportunity to work for Compact Computer Corporation for a little bit of time, and decided that I wanted to go into some type of sales, and went to work for Home Savings of America.
Oh, sure.
For about 10 years there, and they were getting in the process of selling off, and I found that it was the opportunity for me to leave based on my geographic area and kind of loans in the area and stuff, and somewhere that could really service the loans well and take care of the operation that I looked to put together over the years.
When did you start with First Horizon?
I started with First Horizon in January of '97, first of January 3rd of '97, and have been with them ever since.
Where's your geographic territory?
I actually handle the northeast Tarrant County area. If you're familiar, that would be the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I'm right close to the airport.
Oh, okay.
In Tarrant County.
Okay. And are you a manager?
Yes, I am a manager. Became a manager shortly after I moved to First Horizon. I had always turned down being a manager, but decided that I was going to go ahead and with the decisions that were being made locally with all the DU and LP and different things, that I wanted to have that opportunity to kind of run the office too.
And how many loan officers do you have working with you?
I have 5 loan officers that currently work for me. They're pretty much, I try to handle pretty top producers. They average anywhere from $1.5 million at a low to about $3.5 to $4 million a month. So I have 5 guys, and
hey, that's great.
About $13 million.
You're cranking.
Yeah, not too bad.
Yeah, right. And you do $60 million on top of it. That's very hard to do. I interview a lot of producing managers, as a matter of fact. But once you get up into those numbers, it really does get hard. I'm sure you have pretty heavy work day. Let me ask you, let's kind of go back just a little bit in time, and we're going to spend very little time on it, but just want to kind of ask you how you got started, and did you go after realtors, and how did you get your business established?
Well, when I first started out, I was fairly young in my market and right out of school, and I found out that most of the real estate agents, being that young, had a little bit of a hard time having someone so young in that. So I found out that I had to get their trust. So I went after real estate agents and people in the community. I basically tried to go to every kind of function, every kind of outgoing function that anyone was having, so they get my name out in the market. And then I became good friends with a lot of the people in the market, and that's how I gained their trust.
Mm-hmm. You actually raised a rather interesting question. We don't talk about it too much, but perhaps you're kind of, if not uniquely, certainly went through the wars and can address it, because a lot of the loan officers listening out there are people that are young, that are getting started, and a lot of them are the people that physically look young.
Right.
And you and I both know that can be a problem. I was a little bit older when I started, and I had a good real estate background, so the transition was not difficult for me. But I just thought you might address that from your perspective on what loan officers out there can do to overcome it. And I mean, that runs the whole continuum. I've had people grow mustaches and put glasses on, and there's a lot of little tricks. But I wonder if you would address some things that they could possibly do.
Well, I think that the main thing is that every day that I came to work, I wanted to be professional and have that professional image. Second of all, being professional consists of a lot of different things, and that the first thing that I did is I wanted to know as much as I could about the products. I think when you go out there and you're green, they're going to test you. Most of the agents and builders are going to find out just what you you know, and the more you know and they feel comfortable with that, you can overcome that age difference pretty easy, as long as you're making sure that the information that you're giving them is accurate.
So you think product knowledge is really a key?
Very, very important that you have product knowledge. I think that the more that you can get people doing loans with them, you earn their respect that way. You know, if you're able to show them different products, tell them about different products, go into different ways about doing a mortgage and why you should be doing a mortgage with me, really starts to earn their trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that and persistence too. You know, when you're young, it really does come across, and I think a lot of young loan officers out there don't really understand some of the true dynamics that you and I might understand, in the sense that when a realtor loses a deal, you know, they're losing $3, $4, $5, sometimes more $1,000. When a loan officer loses a deal, they can lose anywhere from, you know, $300 to $1,000 on average. And so the dynamics are different, and realtors take it much more seriously.
I think that you need to know that, you know, your one transaction may be the only transaction that they're doing that month, and they hold that very, very valuable. A lot of times they may have spent some of that money, and
that's
so
right.
You want to make sure that you're on their side, and they understand that it's just as valuable to you. It's all about taking care of them and the customer.
Right, exactly. Let's kind of update this, since you're a manager today, and talk about stuff that's going on out in the real world. What are some of the problems that you're seeing out there in relation to realtors? And by that, just to throw something out, some of the control business arrangements with companies having mortgage companies out there. What are some of the issues you see out there today?
Well, I see that more and more people are trying to knock the real estate agents or the real estate community out of the transaction. Unfortunately, being in the business as long as I have, there are alternatives to the real estate agent, but I still think that real estate agent is the primary focus if someone wants a good job. You know, the internet is one of the things that seems to be, on a normal basis, I pick up 2 or 3 loans a month that they thought they were getting something that they really weren't getting, and come to find out, you know, it didn't go near as smooth as they thought.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the huge issues. I just feel that there's a lot of cutthroatness basically in the real estate community right now, as far as other people trying to get ways to leave out the real estate agent. And the top agents are finding a way to adapt to that. You know, they're explaining how their commission is it's worthy of that price. I really think that you need that real estate agent in that transaction a lot of times. Maybe not every time, but a lot of times I think it goes a lot smoother.
Yeah. In that same vein with the internet, we've beat this to death in some other interviews, so we won't spend a lot of time on it, but maybe just to kind of confirm some of the things that you're saying, that with the internet, I think you're finding that a lot of people out there are using it for informational purposes, and then, you know, just like the car business, they want to go kick that tire and open the door, number one. And I think secondly, when it comes to the internet, that a lot of the internet companies looks like you'll look at a site and it looks like the price is really good, or the price and points are good, but when you get in there, at least the sources that I've talked to, and I've talked to a lot of them, they're finding that they're building a lot of junk fees in there, to a point where one of the ways loan officers are countering the internet is they're simply sending out a good faith estimate and saying, hey, get back to the internet company and do apples to apples, and sure enough, they're getting back to them and saying, boy, you were right.
That's a huge thing. That seems to be how a lot of my competition, you know, I'm referred a lot of times, the only person that's referred to by these agents. And, you know, when someone calls, really you're not comparing apples with apples. When you know, the first thing I recommend is let's always get a good faith estimate. If that deal is out there, there's no one quoting 0.5% lower than most other companies, because, you know, we would all be trying to sell to that company if that was the case.
Right. It's not doable.
Right, and as we go into our industry right now, we're finding out that the people that are doing super discount, trying to do a super discount deal, are going out of business or are on the auction blocks for selling. The problem is that when you deal with maybe a broker company out there, or someone on the internet, that their fees are quite a bit more than a lot of the normal people that are doing mortgages day in and day out.
Right. Having said that, though, there is a place for the internet, and they are going to get some business. And so the question is, for loan officers out there, how to parry that and how to maintain the advantage that they have now.
And that's a good thing to say. I mean, as of about 10 months ago, not very much of my business was coming across the internet. Believe it or not, with my web page and things going on today, that about 55 to 60% of my applicants are applying online for a mortgage. Then we're approving them, the next day and getting back with them, and then at some point meeting them. It's a convenience thing, knowledge thing. There is a place for it.
Now, when you say, now I want to split a hair here because I'm not talking about the mortgage.coms and the ones that are originating, or at least you're not talking about originating directly the internet. You're talking about the business now that you're picking up through your own website.
Correct.
And I find that interesting because my next question to you on that is that as I kind of read this, it seems to me there's a couple ways that either people are getting on your website and they're filling out a partial 1003 or a full 1003 or what, or it also sounds like perhaps your company is pretty advanced and you when you get a prospect and you're talking to them on the phone, you're really also directing them to a website for convenience and saying, hey, fill the stuff out, on the web and just download it and we can get started for you and save you some time.
Correct. That's, we're not selling on the internet. We're actually using it as a tool.
Exactly.
And a convenience.
It's almost like a POS system in itself. What software are you using?
Our company has their own software. We have a application, and they put that together for the loan officers that are in our company. We have a special system, and what we basically do, we have a loan officer, what we call Loan Officer Plus, and they're able to do an application online, and then we download our Gallagher system.
Oh, to Gallagher? Yeah, I know, Tom. Let me ask you, as far as your system, are you using laptops out in the field?
Yeah, we have the option. Here's the thing. With the top producers, you find, some of the old guys, what I consider an old guy, we do it a couple different ways. You have new loan officers that are with me that basically they like to have their laptop. We've set them up where they can do everything, pull up applications, they can pull up rates, they can do everything off their laptop. Where me as a manager, I'm more tied. I'm tied to the office, so I really don't use a laptop, but I have a standalone, and I have an assistant, and basically we do it right in here versus having a laptop. We're versatile. I think both work very well, especially in remote areas. I have a loan officer that is about 25 miles away where he basically downloads everything right into my branch. He takes an application, he downloads, and it goes right to his processor, and it's automatically input into the system, and then our underwriters look at it immediately.
Well, the system you have, I know Doug Gallagher. I actually know his brother, Tom, too, but it's a first-class operation. They have a real good system, and they've been around a long time. Let's talk more on some of the specifics of selling. How do you train your loan officers? And I say that knowing full well that they're all reasonably heavy hitters, but in terms of ongoing training, I mean, do you go out in the field with them? How do you maintain control of them?
Well, two of the loan officers that I have, I actually trained previously. One of them was out of college, and one of them had processed for a long time at a mortgage company, and I had them under my wing. One of them was for a year. We went over every programs. We went over different scenarios, and over that training period, he really learned a lot, and I'm very proud that he became a top hitter and one of our top hitters in our company also. The other one, basically by going out and going over the scenarios, every time I go into an office, I try to go in there about once every 3 months or go out with one of the loan officers just to make sure that I'm not losing perspective on maybe a different territory. But we interact quite often on new files that come in the office, scenarios, new programs, new competition, and so on.
And are you a hands-on manager? And I'm not saying that the one is better than the other. I mean, Ronald Reagan didn't know what was going on and, did a reasonably good job. So.
Well, in my office, We have about 12 other support staff, and we really have the operation where most of them have been with me over 10 years, so they're very, very good. We don't lose people, so the loan officers feel very confident that when they turn in a file, they need to go get another one. That's very important, that you don't have your loan officers sitting around here not out getting business. I tell them constantly, I pay people to process the file, I pay you to go get the file. And that's where we see a lot of loan officers that may babysit a file, have one or two files, and you can't do that and be very productive.
Mm-hmm.
You have to let the professionals that do that processing that file. Now, obviously, you have to try to get some documentation right up front, but once you have a system down, which we do, we always try to get that information before they come into that office. The majority of the people that come into my office or to my loan officers have already had a 1003 in their hand and a checklist of stuff that they need to bring in. Very important that they have some of that stuff when they come in.
So
not wasting
by the time, right, so by the time they're getting in, I'm assuming your loan officers are just getting quality talk time with them to develop a relationship, as opposed to, going through bank statements at that point.
Right, and I personally, that's a huge thing with me. I see loan officers, and I had to stop mine. I'm going like, okay, you're running from here to there to there, and by the end of the day, you may have done 2 apps or 3 applications, and you spend all night trying to return phone calls. I really feel that if you have the customer come to you with some information, a lot of time we get that information before I ever see them. We've already pulled up a credit report. We've already got all their loan ready to approve, and it's truly a 20 or 30-minute quality time that you bond with that customer versus going like, okay, what's this bank statement? What's that account number? That's really not how you're going to sell. That's not very personal to me.
Yeah, and when you do it the other way and you're busy doing the 1003, you can't ask them about their kids. You cannot get that relationship because that relationship is established during that meeting. I mean, the primary part of the relationship. I
think the majority of my time we talk everything about mortgage, and about 10 minutes of that time is talked about the mortgage because we've prepped them up front. We've already went over scenarios and things. Then we may just tweak it a little bit when they're in here, make sure they don't have any questions or anything. I love for them to come in, and when they walk in, they say, well, here's this additional thing that you told me, and you go, well, here's this approval. And they're going, I'm approved. I'm going like, I'm waiting on your contract. It really shows them now you're on top of it. You've already started, that their loan's important, and then you're ready to talk about their kids, talk about the game, talk about the area they're moving in. And it's very important that you see that you're known as very knowledgeable in the market, school districts, things that are going on, because those are the things that affect them after they leave this office.
Mm-hmm. And once these people leave, do you have any, and I'm not looking for anything confidential to your company, but do you have anything in place, either as a manager or programs that you recommend so they can keep in touch, some sort of a contact management program?
Very big on that. I personally send out about 6,000 letters every single month. I either send out cards, recipe cards, letters, contact. On every closing, we send out a binder that basically has a copy of all the information that they've done with us. A copy of the HUD, a copy of the closing statement, a copy of their application, deed of trust, and the survey. And then on the back is a little letter that basically says, we've really tried to do a great job for you, and we would appreciate anyone moving into the area having that same experience.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that's generating leads for you?
Yeah. Matter of fact, most of our business is a great referral source. I send out, like I said, a lot of mailers and stuff, and just keep them abreast on what's going on in the market, and it really does help.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, a lot of loan officers, especially in some of the smaller companies, you're a larger company, you're much more computerized. But a lot of loan officers out there with some of the smaller companies, they really don't work that resource properly. It's, they talk to them and, hey, send me some business, and maybe they'll send something once a year or call, when they're feeling down a little bit. But they just do not have a program, and they don't work that program. And, for $200, you can go out and buy Act or Gold Mine and set your own thing up.
Well, and that's it's really, whether you're a small company or a little company, it's very important to do that. One of the letters that I send out at least once a year is I say, if you're deciding to move, if you're looking to move out of the area, we're still able to help you with that mortgage, and we've got your information right here at any time. It really makes them. I have a customer last week that's moving to San Antonio, and he said, Mark, I'm moving to San Antonio. I just bought my house from you 2 years ago. I really don't want to go through, the big process again, and we pulled up his application, sent him a checklist of some updated stuff, and he's ready to go.
Yeah.
And that's just one of those that he would have forgot about you as a loan officer. They forget as much information as they get from other banks and resources about doing mortgages. If you're just touching them ever so often, they really will think of you.
Right, exactly. And you don't even have to do it once a month or,
Right.
but once a quarter or once a third of a year. That's more than adequate just to keep your name.
Yeah.
And also continuously ask for the business. These people that send recipes and that's fine and it has a place. But if you don't ask for the business, you're not going to get it.
Yeah, I think, it was nice. Like I said, I send out some recipe cards and stuff, and I get everyone kind of involved in that, and I'm surprised that I get so much response on that. But right after that, shortly they get a letter, once a quarter. It says, just thinking of you, and basically, if you know anyone, send them our way.
Mm-hmm.
We're still here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what? A lot of I've done over 60 interviews, and one of the interesting things is that as you're doing these with the top hitters in the business and major producers, how tuned in they are to doing these things and working their database. I think most of the heavy hitters I talk to, they're getting at least, if they've been in business 6-7 years, they're now getting anywhere between 35 and in some cases as close as 50% of their business just working their referrals.
It's a great source of business. I think that it's probably the most neglected. And to give you an idea, I hired a producer that had been in the business in my area for about 16 years that I hired her away from a company, and she worked. And the first thing I said is, let me see your database, and we'll help you set that up and send out some letters and things as far as congratulations, you've moved. And she said, I don't have one. And you don't have one? And so we immediately got that together, and she did have some applications and stuff, and we ended up putting it together for her, and it's been great.
Yeah, but it's amazing, once you neglect it, though, to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here, at some point it's very difficult to go back in time to construct it.
Very much so. I mean, obviously, if she would have been keeping that database from the last 16 years, we would have been miles ahead.
So, she probably wouldn't have had to put her foot outside the office.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of a shame almost when you hear stories like that. But that's actually not unusual.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people out there that, they're not thinking of 4 or 5 years down the line, and so they get stuck in that $15 to $20 million category where they're making an okay amount, and but they don't understand why they can't get to 40.
And the things where I started realizing some of this stuff is that, you do someone that's, 48 or 50 years old, and they have kids, and their kids want to buy a house, and you're going like, and the dad says, you're going over here, I already know where we're going to go and help you get this mortgage, and you're seeing them, once they have a good experience, they want to make sure that their kids don't get run around, or, they have a friend or relative, and it's a great resource.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to bounce back just a minute and talk about realtors and some of the things your loan officers do to get into offices. Now, I understand they're pretty established, but you and I know that the offices are not like when you and I were in business years ago, where you pretty much had easy entree and, hearty, good fellow handshakes and stuff like that. It's a much different atmosphere, and I would like for you to address not so much the problem. I think everyone's aware of what's going on, but some of the solutions to the problem.
Well, I think that one thing that I teach is that once you make an insight, once you do a transaction with a real estate agent, that's the opportunity, if you're not in that office already, to get into that office, because they're concerned only when you have a transaction. You have a real estate agent or a listing agent. She obviously wants to make sure that that mortgage goes through. So at that time, you should play on, hey, I need to come in and talk to you. I want to go over this and just tell you what's going on. It gives you a great opportunity, and why you should be in that office. You know, you're doing something for that real estate agent, and she shouldn't have a hard time letting you in. Once you get into these offices, it's easy to stay in. As long as you stay in front of them, you're going to be able to keep on going back and forth in these offices, most of them. Even with the brokers and even with the mortgage companies in these offices, they're always looking for someone else to take care of their transaction.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about the use of not just price sheets that get handed out, but also pricing in the business?
Well, that's the issue right now, is that I think everyone's trying to feel comfortable on where to price. There are people that are trying to buy the industry as far as pricing goes, and we've seen them go by the wayside.
Mm-hmm. It's an old story.
Right. You know, if you have the cheapest rate in town and you sell the cheapest rate in town, you're probably going to be gone eventually in town, is the way everyone looks at it.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody expects for you to have fair pricing and fair rates and fees and take care of their customers. As far as pricing the best rate in town, I really don't get into, you know, I have people shop me every day, don't get me wrong, but we don't get into big arguments on pricing. It just seems not to be a huge issue. Once you learn, half the time the customer calls you and thinks he's doing a jumbo fixed rate when he's doing a conforming, and people are pricing the wrong rate. You know, you need to be aware of really what they're asking for and what they're really looking for before you start pricing or pricing. When someone calls me on the phone and just wants a price, that sends up a red flag automatically.
Well, I mean, most of the heavy hitters I talk to, they just absolutely will not give a price right off the bat. I mean, they'd rather turn the call down. In fact, many of them do. If they're insistent, they're just price shoppers.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've learned is, you know, if you give them the lowest rate, then they're coming, you know, that's not why you want them in your office. You're going to give them a range, you know. I usually try to give them a range of from Monday to Friday, telling them what a high and a low has been, to give them kind of a range of where the product is. You know, if you're looking for a 30-year fixed rate, the low's been at this price, the high's been at this price. It bounces up and down every day, an eighth of a point, just a normal day. So usually that's the way I work on the pricing issue.
Yeah, in fact, that's a real nice little nifty trick there, because, you know, in today's environment, pricing's changing every couple hours, and, you know, when the market takes a hit, you know, you can't even get a lock in.
Yeah, and that's another thing. One of the big things that I do is, I think one of the issues that a lot of people have is they go into an office, they don't lock in a rate, they're told that they can't lock in a rate and so on. And one of the things that I have come up with is that we put right up front, okay, you have the ability to lock in at any time. This is one of the things that our competition may or may not let you do. Here's where you're at today. You make the decision. This is probably the most important thing that you're going to decide on. You make the decision whether you want to lock or float, and you take the gamble. And if you present it to them, usually they're not calling back going like, well, you told me that the rate was here. I gave you the opportunity to lock in that rate. You elected not to lock in that rate. That's out of my control.
Mm-hmm. But once again, that's nothing more than a version of taking the sales objection away before the objection comes up.
Correct.
Which is one of the classic techniques of sales. I mean, this is a version of it, of preparing the people properly.
That's the whole issue. You have to explain to them where the pricing comes from, how it affects their rate. One of the things that I see is that people come in and they'll say, I like that 8% rate, but I really am trying to get to that 7 7/8% rate. And, you figure up the payment, and, okay, you understand that payment on a $100,000 loan may be $8 or $10. Do you really want to take that gamble? And after you explain it to them, most people didn't realize that it's not a significant amount of money. In most cases, there are cases that are, but on a lot of time it's not, and they'll go ahead and lock in the loan at that time.
I got a better one for you. I would look at it from the opposite side of the coin and say that there's a lot of loan officers out there who do understand that it only represents $8 or $9 a month difference, and really don't have the presence of mind to present it the way you just did.
Right, and that's what I'm saying.
That's even worse.
When you present it to that customer and you make them knowledgeable, then they see that they can make their own choice. It's their choice, and then you don't get in that rate fluctuation rate, fighting for an eighth of a point up or down or here. It's really that customer starts to realize what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I agree. Let's change directions here entirely, and I wanted to ask you how you feel about, I guess you can put any kind of label on it, I'd call it maybe alternative sources of business, be they attorneys or CPAs or title attorney, I mean anything to operate outside the box of realtors, and what kind of importance you place on that, and what do your people do?
Well, that's in the last 3 years, I've seen that a majority of the business has been changing, where we were getting 70% or so of that business from real estate agents, maybe even 80%, that so many people have done mortgages in the area. Everyone has a different opinion on who's good and who's not good as far as the mortgage industry, so you need alternative sources of alternative sources of business. And I've went out and done quite a bit of that, relying on local banks, to be real honest with you. I do a lot of business with the local banks in town.
I want to stop you right there because that's something that no one has ever discussed in all 60 interviews. So when we get a new idea, I immediately like to bore in on it. And in fact, I've always said that every interview I do, there's always something new. And so how about talking about that? I like that.
Okay. Well, finding out, I do a lot of what we call build jobs or construction lending, and a lot of the banks that are not set up to do permanent financing. You either do permanent financing very well, or you don't do it very well at all. And so the banks are set up to do interim financing. Well, when they're set up to do interim financing, they always need someone that's going to get them out of that interim and move them into a permanent financing position. I went out and targeted about 10 banks in the local area here, and kind of just asked questions. Where are your mortgages? What's happening? And come to find out, they're very frustrated with having mortgage companies give them an approval letter and come to find out at the end they're not approved and so on. So I set up and started to do a lot of work with the banks, guaranteeing approvals, getting them to trust me. And now they're referring almost every client that they have as an interim to us.
That's incredible.
As far as to put, we've joined partners with First Horizon in making your loan experience a success without me soliciting to do that. So, they really need that for them to create that interim finance business. I'm a little bit shocked listening to this. It's not that I doubt it. I don't doubt it at all. What I find so incredible in this day and age that you have banks out there that really aren't savvy enough to pick up end loans like that. And, of course, for you and for mortgage brokers and mortgage bankers, that just screams opportunity to me. On a regular basis, we probably get about 5 loans a month that are sent directly from the local banks and stuff. And, you start doing business and with the bank presidents having their personal mortgages, and then you find out that the tellers and stuff, you're doing their mortgages. Well, you get everyone excited about somewhere to send their mortgages. And at the same thing, I turn around and if someone wants a boat loan or someone wants some type of other loan, obviously I refer them back to them to keep everything, right in hand and everybody happy.
That's a great idea. It's wonderful when you kind of discover a niche that's out there that very few people are actually working. And I say that because, and I brought this up a couple times, but I just love it. I talked to a woman, I think it was out in the Midwest, I kind of forgot now, and you know what she did? She specialized in stockbrokers. And the way she went about it is she reasoned that stockbrokers want to get as much money from their client as possible so they can invest in stocks, which, you normally say, well, duh. But she took it to a new level. she came out and figured, well, gee, if I can get hold of their client base and go to them and convince them that I can do 90s and 95s and 100% financing, the less money they have to put down, the more money they have to put in the market. And so she went out, started hitting stockbrokers with every program that she could come up with and put together for low down payment financing, and the stockbrokers went crazy and just sent her. That's how she does her business.
Well, like on the banks that I do business, it was a great source of business because they already had the loan applications there. They already had the financial statements there. All I have to do is get permission to get them and take them in here and get approved. Mm-hmm. Very little work on this.
I think there's a lot of loan officers out there that are new, don't have the experience you and I do, that maybe don't understand so much concepts like acquisition and development and construction loans and how this even takes place. I wonder if you might just tell them a little bit about what the world is really like out there in the banks.
Well, the majority of the banks in the area that I work in, they're smaller banks. You know, we have the big banks too in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but a lot of independent banks. The independent banks are very, very good on customer service, and a lot of customers really like that and rely on that. They want someone to handle that transaction from start to finish. They know that they're going to pay a fair market rate. They just want someone to do all the paperwork, do all the approvals, and let me go to closing and sign. So the local banks get a lot of what we consider self-employed borrowers, get a lot of hiring-in clientele that really just want you to handle the whole transaction. Those banks want to keep these customers happy and keep their money in the bank, so they don't want to send it to some other bank that might do the mortgages and the interim and everything.
And catch their credit cards.
Reserves and all their CDs and all their other investment accounts.
Yeah, that's their paranoia.
Right, that's their paranoia. So they want to go ahead and send it to someone like me that basically we're not going after their checking and we're not going after their savings account. We want the permanent mortgage, and that makes it very easy for them. They're not set up to, with the manpower of the banks and the hours that they work, they're not set up to process a lot of mortgages at the end. You know, they just want to turn it over and release it and let them go down the road.
Right. But I think that you raise also another important point, is that this is a niche program that not everybody can do. If you are working for Bank of America, just to pick one, your chances of being successful in that are nil, for the simple reason that the bank president of the small bank and everything, he knows that the first time that loan gets on the books, they're going to get solicited for CDs, for credit cards, and whatever, and that's what scares them. So if you have an institution like yourselves that's not your market niche, that's not where you want to be, then you have a much better chance.
Correct. No, we're going to basically be soliciting the mortgages, and we're not going to be soliciting for credit cards and so on.
Right, exactly. And that's a very strong thing when you walk in there as far as a selling tool. How about some other areas? I really happen to like that one, but I'm almost tempted to end the interview on that one. That's so good. But any other groups or stuff that you happen to like?
Well, a really good source of business for me is that I got in with some friends and builders in the area, and I found out that there's so many people hitting the builders. I go for a custom builder, maybe they build 10 or 15 houses a year. They may do anywhere from $250,000 to $1 million houses, but those guys are not hit on like the David Weekleys or the D.R. Hortons or, the Pulte's. These guys are guys that really are the custom type builders, and they are very particular about, they're very cliquish who they do business with. They've got to rely on you. They want to see you as a friend. And how I got in on doing a bunch of their business is that actually I found out that the main supplier for all the lumber in the area was a guy that I knew, and I had him take me around and introduce me to all the builders. It was a way to get in with these, and we started doing little fishing trips and hunting trips, and as a part of that I would go along and sponsor part of the things where you have, it's me, it's the lumber salesman, and it's 15 custom builders. You don't have a better atmosphere for a weekend doing stuff with them.
Well, you're not kidding.
And so you don't have anyone else. You're not competing against anyone else. And at any time, you let them bring up certain subjects or ask, and you get them involved. And it's amazing if you can get them outside of work doing other things as a group. It worked out better than you can even imagine. As you know, we would go on a little trip to Mexico and go fishing, and we kind of split the cost of doing that. And you have 4 or 5 hours every day that you're spending with this group that you're the only guy there that does mortgages. You know they all have to have mortgages and want to, you know, about where their specs are, you know what's on the ground, what's going on, and then you're more of the team, as they put it. You're part of the team because these builders all know each other, and yes, they're in competition, but they all know that they all need each other, kind of like in the area. They all go into certain subdivisions, and so you're just build yourself as part of the team or a group of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes that competition and the rate and all that just go away. That's just never talked about.
Well, that's kind of a byproduct of it. And because when you get with small builders like that, they are very attuned to one thing and one thing only, and that's getting off that construction loan, and they want a very high service level, exceptionally high service level.
Right. And you're amazed that those clientele and those builders bring you the top quality people that you want to deal with. They're, they know that they've got a real buyer. This is the guy you want to, hey, I'm selling this house. Have you found any financing? Well, if you have, I still want you to check and just compare this. And it's amazing, they've got that buyer right there with that house, and that buyer may be moving into town, and your recommendation will a lot of times get that transaction.
Yeah, and also in this day of the large builders and everything, and where they're setting up their own mortgage companies, where you're having a lot of medium-sized builders that are getting bought out today and merged. A lot of these small builders, that's what they want to do. They want to build 12, 15 custom homes a year, and they make a real good income, and that's the niche they want to be in.
Right. And being flexible, the builders, when they know the product, they're at the end of their construction and the customer wants to close, and, maybe they want to roll in a pool or do something. When they know that you have the ability to be flexible and help them out and help the customer and, maybe roll this into the mortgage, it really works very, very well. Whereas a tract builder, this is the way it is. You pick from this house, you pick this color, or you pick this, and we don't deviate. So it's easier to work this type of clientele.
Right, and you get a better kind of clientele, too.
Right.
Well, look, I don't want to push my luck here. I think these are two fabulous ideas. They're new ideas. Certainly the first one is, and they're good. And that's what our listeners out there, they're looking for. And they're looking for an edge. They're looking for a marketing way to get to that next level and to go from $20 to $40 million. And to do that, they need ideas like this. And I want to thank you very much for taking the time to talk to our people, Mark. And we'll keep in touch and have a great day.
You have a good day, too.
Great.